Hi everyone, my name is Ava and I am a freshman at Brown and I'm part of the program in liberal medical education. I was also recently accepted to the University of Rochester's Rochester Early Medical Scholars Program and Yale, along with quite a few other schools. Today I'll be detailing my activities and extracurriculars, and it's a sequel to my stats video, which I can link up above. Just as a disclaimer, I don't know exactly what worked for me, so while I'm putting all of this information out there, I'm not sure what stood out to admissions officers when they read my application or any of that. I can only provide what I put down on the page, but I can't really make any big analysis of what was actually helpful, and I don't know if certain parts of my application helped or if they hurt. So this is more of general information on one student who was accepted to this program, but it's by no means reflective of the entire admissions process or what each school is looking for, because they accept a broad range of students who all look quite a bit different from each other. So this is just showing you some perspective on myself, but it doesn't exactly speak for the broader admissions process. Alright, so let's get into it. I'll start with honors because that's what I have sitting right in front of me. So my first honor that I put down was that I was a National Merit semifinalist, and this was a national award that I was awarded in grade 12. And I put down semifinalist instead of finalist because at that point, finalists had not been awarded yet. Those awards come out in February. When I won the finalist award in February, I went back into each individual college portal and updated them there instead of putting it on the Common App. My second award that I put down was from my school. It was an $8,000 academic scholarship, and I had that award through 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. You should always be specifying the exact amount of money when you're talking about scholarships, just because that's some extra information colleges like to know. After that, I put down that I was a state competitor for HOSA's Biomedical Laboratory Science competition, and I also put down that 20 students were selected, again because numbers are super important. They give more information, just like giving money for scholarships. Telling how many students were selected, how selective certain processes are, helps colleges to understand the rigor of certain activities. And I put down that this was a state/regional competition because it was for Washington HOSA. And since I was a competitor both in 10th and 11th grade, I put that down as well. Next up, I put down that I was a Poetry Out Loud regional champion. Again, I gave the number of students selected. I said 2 champions out of 1,800 competitors because selectivity is important for colleges to know. And I said that it was a state/regional competition and that it happened in 11th grade. Finally, as my last slot in the honors section, I put down that I was the winner of the Tacoma Youth Symphony Concerto competition. Unlike my other slots where I was able to say how many students were selected, I didn't know this information, so I just left it out. While having selectivity is important, if you don't have that information, it's okay to not put it in there. I said that this was a school competition, which isn't entirely accurate because it was through Tacoma Youth Symphony. However, I figured that since this organization and this competition ran similarly to a school where it was only open to students who were enrolled in Tacoma Youth Symphony, I decided to put it as school instead of as state/regional. And this was one in 11th grade. As to how I chose to order my honors in the category, I chose to put the most prestigious awards first. So National Merit semifinalist to me was the most prestigious award that I had. So I put that first so that admissions officers would see it right from the beginning. And then I ranked it in order of prestige after that. Generally, national awards will usually be the most prestigious, and school awards will usually be less prestigious, although they are also important to include, especially if you feel like they represent a part of you. Alright, now on to activities. To me, this was a super important part because it showed what I had been doing throughout my time in high school. It showed where I had put my passions and invested my interests, and it was really nice to write it all down and see what I had accomplished. Now, if you're a senior, luckily this is not a section where you're gonna have to be working super hard. You've already done all of these things, you can relax, you can breathe a bit. What you have to do now is just write them down and order them. So for my first activity that I put down, I had an internship with the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in the summer after my 11th grade year. And what I wrote down exactly was virtual setting due to COVID, met with researchers and discussed their work, learned lab techniques, for example, PCR, gene sequencing, mentored by Dr. Torok Storb. And I just wrote that down. It was a pretty short blurb. You don't get a lot of room in explaining what you're putting down. I wrote down that it was a virtual setting because during normal years I would actually be in a lab conducting research myself. However, this year, because of COVID, of course, we couldn't do that, so we were meeting with researchers, we were discussing their work, we were discovering our passions in other ways. And then I also explained that I did learn lab techniques just to show that I did have some experience through that. And I wrote down who my mentor was because she is very famous in her field. She's done a lot of work there, and I wanted to show that I had been trained by someone who is incredibly knowledgeable. One of the hardest parts of this process is just going through and breaking it down into tiny little blurbs because you barely get any space at all to explain these things that you've been doing, and it's really hard to condense that information. So just try to stick with what you feel is most important to you. As for my next one, I put down that I was the founder and president of a HOSA chapter at my high school. And I also explained what HOSA was. Not everyone knows what that acronym is. And while I'm guessing college admissions officers would, just to be safe, I wrote out Health Occupation Students of America, Future Health Professionals. And I only chose the top 3 things that we had done in that activity. I said organized meetings with health professionals, participated in state-level competition, created Tacoma Science Alliance, a 4th through 6th grade science program. And since you don't get much room, that's kind of all you can put down. We had done quite a few other things, but I chose the things that I thought would stand out the most and be the most interesting because I didn't have enough room to say that I also planned meetings or I also did other things. I expected that since I was president, they would understand that I led meetings, and I chose to put down other information that might be a bit less assumable. All right, as to my third one, this is also HOSA related. I chose to split these 2 things up into different sections. I was also the Washington HOSA Region 4 Vice President for HOSA. And I put that down as a separate blurb because A, it was only in my 11th and 12th grade year rather than my 10th, 11th, and 12th as with the other activity. And B, since it was a region-wide activity instead of a school-wide activity, I felt like it deserved a second box, even though it was through the same organization. And then as to what I wrote down in the blurb that I got, I said state officer for the Puget Sound, social media coordinator for Instagram at WAHOSA Official, about 750 followers, host statewide webinars, plan conferences. So I said for the Puget Sound because Region 4, they don't necessarily know what that means. So I wanted to be specific about which region I was the vice president for and explain that clearly. I also, when I said that I was the social media coordinator, made sure to write down the username of the Instagram account that I was in charge of. And I also put down the number of followers because, again, numbers are key. It's important that these admission officers are knowing exactly what you're doing here. I put down host statewide webinars and plan conferences because those are the 2 biggest activities of the vice president. And sure, we do a lot of other activities, but since you're limited on space, you can either A, elaborate that in essays, or B, just know that what you're putting down is the most important part. All right, as for my next one, I mentioned that I was the facilitator for the Meals for Frontline Workers project at my family's restaurant. So during COVID, we would go and we would deliver meals to frontline workers at hospitals. And then I put down the money well, here, what I just put down in the description for activities is we raised $60,000 and had 500 donors. We delivered 3,600 or more meals. We coordinated with hospitals and prepped and delivered meals with my family's restaurant. So I chose to put down this information. First, I put down the dollar amount and the number of donors, as well as the number of meals delivered, because all of that information is really important. Again, be numbers oriented in what you're putting down in this section. That's easy information for admission officers to glance at and without reading much, gain a lot of information. And then I put down my role. So my specific role was coordinating with hospitals, sending emails, getting these drop-off times chosen. So that was what I put down next. And then I also put down that I did prep and deliver these meals. Next, I put down my work. I have worked as a dishwasher, hostess, busser, and food expediter at my family's 2 restaurants for the past 4 years, or throughout my entire time in high school, and mainly on summer breaks. So what I wrote down in the description section was food prep, wash dishes, greet customers, manage to-go orders, communicate between kitchen and front of house. And then I put in parentheses, worked at family restaurant since 9th. And I put all of that down because first I wanted to detail all of the main activities that I had done to show that I had taken on responsibility throughout my time in those roles. And then I also mentioned that it was at my family's restaurant. This was something that was particularly suggested to me by my college admissions counselor at my school. She said that especially if you worked at your family's restaurant, that's a great way to show that you have taken on responsibility. So I just made that section very clear as to what I was doing. All right, next up, I put down my community service. I have volunteered in multiple departments at my local hospital. So what I wrote down was volunteered in Cancer Center, Mother and Newborn Center, and OTPT Clinic. Interact with patients, organize and disinfect stations/rooms, observe nurses. And I wrote down which centers I had worked in first, because that's information that to me was important, just to show which areas of medicine I had been exposed to and to show that I had been exposed to multiple different areas. I next put down my main tasks, making sure to mention that I had interacted with patients, because I feel like that's something that's a step up from just organizing and disinfecting rooms and showing that I have learned how to interact with patients in that sort of clinical setting. I then also mentioned that I had the opportunity to observe nurses and to see what that sort of patient interaction is like, because I think that's also something that was important and made me stand out as having some experience in the medical field. Although I personally was not performing any of these tasks, I was able to watch and observe, and that is also important. Next, I put down that I was a member of my school's science team. And to explain a bit more of what that meant and what it did, because of course science team is a rather general term, I wrote down designed and performed long-term research projects. And then in parentheses, I listed the titles of these projects, which were effective pollution on bean plants and impact of calcium pathways on muscle contraction. Those two were my projects in my 9th and my 11th grade years, respectively. We had not started on the 12th grade year projects while I was putting down my activities list, so while I was in science team, I did not mention the title of my project that year, simply because A, due to COVID, we ended up not getting to perform those experiments, and B, even if we had, they wouldn't have been listed yet. So it's okay to just put down mainly information from your 9th through 11th grade years, because of course you're writing this at the very beginning of your senior year. You don't have to have a ton of information down about that. Next up, I put down that I was a part of Tacoma Biosynth Incubator's wet lab, outreach, and entrepreneurship programs for their iGEM team. iGEM stands for Internationally Genetically Engineered Machine, and it's a very popular competition. However, since most colleges are familiar with this and even have iGEM programs of their own, I felt like spelling out that acronym wasn't super necessary, and I was also lacking on space, so I just figured if they were really curious, they would Google it. For my description, I wrote down that we had a project examining the efficacy of 3 different bacteria's ability to degrade LDPE plastic. And I wrote down that due to COVID, there was no lab access, so we created a research paper instead. As for the first part of this description, this just gave basic information as to what we were doing in a fairly concise way. And for the second part, I figured it was important to mention that in normal years, I would be doing lab activity. Since I didn't have much lab activity listed on my extracurriculars, I wanted to show that I had taken an initiative and wanted to have those experiences, but simply wasn't able to, and had these constraints of basically what was going on in the world. You all know exactly what's been happening for the past 2 years, so I don't have to explain too much. Luckily, just writing COVID on some of my extracurriculars made it clear why some of them were less impressive or exciting than they could have been. It definitely is an excuse that is understandable and able to be used if you're wanting to explain why you don't necessarily have things on there that you wish you did, such as shadowing or research or other activities like that that simply have been halted due to the pandemic. Now we're moving on from my STEM activities. I wanted to place them all up towards the front so that they were grouped together and it'd be easier for an admissions officer to read and make it clear what my main focus was. But as for my next activity, I put down that I was the second chair oboist in my local youth symphony association. And for the description, I wrote down that I was currently in the highest level symphony in this organization. I lead 3 other oboists, and I performed the Albinoni Oboe Concerto with the Junior Youth Symphony. These were the 3 pieces of information I wanted to put down. My first one, that I was in the highest level symphony in the organization, showed that I took that activity seriously and that I had progressed to the highest level. My second one showed that I lead 3 other oboists, and that's important because it shows that I had taken on a leadership role in this activity. And my third part, that I performed the Albinoni Oboe Concerto, gave a bit more information as to my awards section, where I mentioned that I had won the Tacoma Youth Symphony Concerto competition. So those were the 3 pieces of information I thought were most important to know. And now for the final piece that I could put down on my application. It's always great to fill up all 10 spots on your extracurriculars. You of course don't have to, but if you have activities you can put on there, it's really nice to show that you've been doing a lot of things throughout high school, and probably if you think hard enough, you can think of 10 things. I know myself, I was actually leaving a few things off. Not very many, but just a few other clubs and activities that I had been a part of throughout my time at my high school. So for my last activity, I put down that I was a student ambassador for my high school. And what I said I did was I provide tours and shadow experiences for prospective students. I facilitate and organize school events, and I appear at Tacoma community events. And I put these 3 things down to show that I am involved in my school and local community. I have taken on leadership roles and been friendly and welcoming by being sort of the face of the school and by interacting with prospective students. Basically, I just showed that I have enthusiasm and school spirit, which is always great for a school to know if they want you to be at their school, to see that you'll be an active part of it. Alright, so that's all for my activities. They also ask you a few multiple choice questions for each extracurricular activity, and these are all pretty self-explanatory. They ask you which grades you did this activity in, and whether it was a year-long activity, one you did during the school year, or one you did during break. They also ask you how many hours per week you did this activity and how many weeks per year you did this activity. And that's all pretty self-explanatory. The one thing I'll add in is that if you did an activity during the school year, that's 40 weeks per year. It was a pain for me to calculate, so I'm just putting that info out there so you don't have to calculate it yourself now. And one other thing they ask you is if you'll continue this activity in college. To me, I took that as if you would be continuing the general idea of the activity rather than would you be continuing this exact activity in that exact spot. So, for instance, I put down that I would like to continue to volunteer at a hospital, and although I would not be continuing to volunteer at the exact local hospital that I had put down I was volunteering at, I put down that I would want to be volunteering at the local hospital no matter where I was. Finally, how I chose to order my activities was mainly based on 4 factors, and these were prestige. They were the number of hours I spent on the activity, how time-consuming they were. I then grouped them based on theme, and then I also grouped them based on leadership roles. So, as to prestige, that's why my internship is towards the top. That was an internship that was highly competitive to get into, so I wanted to show that I was accepted into that and that I had learned quite a bit. And then secondly, as for how time intensive, that's why my local HOSA chapter comes actually before my state HOSA chapter, was because I spent 9 hours per week working on leading my local HOSA chapter and only 2.5 hours per week on leading my state chapter. Next, as to grouped by common theme, that's why almost all of my STEM activities are together. And finally, as to leadership ability, that's why my HOSA extracurricular activities come before my school's science team or before iGEM, was because I had more leadership roles in HOSA than I did in either of those other 2 activities. So how you rank is a bit up to you, where of course you can use your judgment and decide what's most important to you and what showcases you most fully. But basically, you want your admissions officer to have the easiest time they possibly can when they're reading through this extracurriculars list. You want to make sure that if they're skimming or they're going by fast and they're mainly looking at the first few activities you're putting down, that you're putting down the ones you want to be most represented by. I hope that helps a bit. That's kind of all I have for my honors in extracurriculars, and it's just showcasing what I put down, what I showed to my admissions officers. There were a few extra things I didn't put down, but those were the ones I wanted to have on paper and I wanted my admissions officers to see. If you yourself would like any help with deciding how to put down your honors or how to put down your extracurriculars or anything else with the application, I do have a tutoring service now. I charge $20 per hour for Zoom calls, or if you would like to send me a draft of your essay or your extracurriculars list and like me to send back feedback and edits, that would be $15. You can just email me at college.with.ava@gmail.com and I will respond back to you very quickly. I am so excited to help, and I can help with anything from essay writing to activities lists to just speaking about the college process in general and how you can best prepare for this application season. Just feel free to shoot me an email at any time. I hope that was semi-helpful and useful and interesting. This provides you just a snapshot of what one student from these programs might look like, but of course it does not account for exactly what admissions officers are looking for, and I know there's a broad range of students that could possibly be accepted. If you're interested in any more videos, just let me know in the comments what you're hoping to see. I plan to upload my next video, which will be my 2-minute video portfolio that I sent to Brown within the next week. And then after that, I'm hoping to upload my essays, as well as just a general run through of what the college admissions process looks like. If you have anything else you're interested in seeing, let me know. And if you have any questions as to this video or anything else, let me know down in the comments and I'll try to answer them. Thank you so much.